In this video, I'm going to talk about the string tokenization function in C called strtok that allows us to take a string and basically split it up based on some delimiters we give it. So to use this function, I'm going to have to include string.h because that is where the function is found, is inside this library here. And this library comes with C. So if you've got C, you've got this library. And then we'll have to make a string. So I'll say car s is equal to this is the way. And what I'll do is I'm going to have some kind of delimiter. So I'm going to say here car d for delimiter is equal to space. Now it doesn't have to be space. It could be anything. It could be comma. I could even have multiple delimiters. So I could have like space and comma are both delimiters. And what's going to happen is when the function encounters a delimiter that's been defined in this string here, as in like one of these characters in this string here, it's going to stop and it's going to give us that portion of the string in return. So if we call the function, we'll say strtok, and I give it s and d here. What's going to happen is it's going to look at this string, and as soon as it encounters the first token defined in this string here, it's going to stop and it's going to return that portion of the string. So we're actually going to keep that portion of the string so we can print it out. So I'm going to say here car star portion is equal to strtok. And I'll call this portion 1 because I'm going to have multiple portions. And then I'm going to say here printf, and I'll say %s, and we'll just print out that first portion there, portion 1. And let's just try this now. Let's compile it and see what happens here. And we get back this. And that makes sense because that's what we wanted, was the first portion of this string up until, but not including this delimiter here, because that is where we delimit the string. That's where we split it up. And that makes sense. Then we got this back. And we could keep calling the function to get the other portions of the string. So the way the function works is that when you call it the first time with a string like this, it knows like, okay, this is the first time I'm being given this string. Therefore, I have to start from the beginning of the string here. If you call the function again and you give it null as the first argument, basically the function knows based on that to use the prior string it was given. So when you call it the first time, it basically keeps and maintains a reference to this string here. And then when you call it again with null, it takes that as a signal that you want to keep looking at the remaining portions of this string. So we'll call it again, and this time we'll call it with null. So I'll call it again. I'll say portion 2 now, and I'll call it with null. So I'll say null here now. And because I'm giving it null, the function looks at this argument and says, well, they gave us null. They want us to use the string we were given last time. So go get the reference we've got to that string and go use that string. And now we're going to expect is back because it should be the second portion of the string from where we left off up until the next delimiter, which is going to be space again, right? We could actually change the delimiter here too, by the way. We could actually give something like comma or something else here, and that would be okay. But we're going to keep the delimiter as space in this case. So we'll run this here, and then now I expect to get back is, right? I expect to get back this and then is. And I could keep going. We could get the other portions of the string. So I'll say here car star portion 2. Let's do portion 3 and portion 4. So we'll say portion 3 and we'll say portion 4. Portion 4, portion 4. And that should give us back the remaining portions of the string, right? Because we should get back then the. And then this should be the last portion because we should reach the end of the string at this point, right? So let's give this a try here. Run this here. We get back this is the way. And this is basically the idea that we want to use when we're using this function is to split up the string like this into these different portions like that, and we can then access them as individual strings and use them. Maybe we're dealing with like comma separated data, something like this, and we want to split up the string based on those commas and deal with each portion individually. That might be a use case for this kind of function. Now, just so we understand how it's working sort of under the hood, let's actually explore that. So number one is, when do we know to stop calling the function? Like in this case, we knew to stop calling the function because we knew that there was 4 portions, right? We knew that there was like this, and then the delimiter, and then this, and then the delimiter, and then this, and then the delimiter, and then this. So we knew to stop calling it after 4 attempts, right? But what if we didn't know how many spaces there were in our string? What if we didn't know how many portions there were to our string? In that case, we're going to have to rely on the function's behavior of returning null when it's done. So strtok is going to return null when it's done, when it can't find any more. So if I try it again here, if I say here car star again, and I say this is going to be equal to string tokenization. We're going to say null, and I'm going to say here D one more time. Let's check out what again is equal to. It's going to turn out that again is equal to null. So if I say here, if again is equal to null, we can say printf, we're done. Else I could say printf, still more to go. And we're going to get we're done. And we're going to get we're done because string tokenization at this point is done. It's processed the entire string. There's no more to find. So it's going to return null. That's its behavior, is when it's done working with the string because it can't find anything else, it returns null. Again is going to store that value. We're going to check if it's null. And if it is, we're going to print out we're done. So that's how we know when we're done, is when string tokenization, when this function returns null. And we could actually write some code to look at our string based on this. So one thing we could do is maybe we'll kind of get rid of this here for a second. We'll comment this out for a second. We could do it this way instead. We could say here that the car star portion is going to be equal to string tokenization S and D, right? So we'll get the first portion of it here. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, while portion doesn't equal null, we're going to keep calling the function while portion doesn't equal null. And we'll print out the portion. So we'll say printf, and we'll do a printf of this portion here. And then we'll call it again. We'll say portion is equal to string tokenization null and D. And so taken all together, what we're doing here now is we're calling the function at least once. And so long as the portion isn't null, maybe the string itself is null or something like that, but so long as the portion isn't null, we're going to print out that portion. And the portion could be the entire string, but we're going to print it out. And then we're going to try to get the next portion of that same string by repeatedly calling the function, this time with null. And we're going to keep on getting the portion. And so long as that portion isn't null, we're going to keep printing it out. And so what we can do is we can programmatically process the string now. We can programmatically handle strings of varying numbers of portions because we're basically relying on the fact that this function will return null when it's done, when it's processed the entire string. So now we could handle like strings of different numbers of portions. So we could say, instead of like, this is the way, we could say, this is the way again. And we can handle like a string of a different number of portions now. So we can clear this out and we can compile this and try running it. And we're gonna get this is the way again. And so we can programmatically handle, strings of different numbers of portions now. So now one other thing we should go over is like, what is this portion? Like it's a pointer to a string, but like, is it a new string? Because one thing string tokenization could be doing is it could technically be creating a new string on the heap, like creating an all new string. And then portion is then a pointer to that new string on the heap. It turns out though, that's not the way string tokenization works. The way it works is it actually just returns a pointer to the existing string. And it actually replaces the delimiters in the existing string with the null terminator. So it actually kind of like cuts up the original string into a series of strings. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Let's actually comment this out for a second here. We'll comment this out for a little bit here. And let's just play around with this first again. So we're going to say here, car star, we'll say P1, and we'll say is equal to strtok SD. And we know from our past experience here that this returns the string this. But what is P1? Like what is that actual memory address? Let's print that out. And let's also print out the memory address for S too. So we'll say here P1%P, and we'll print out the memory address of P1. We're also going to print out the memory address of S as well. And we'll just do a comparison here. So let's compile this again here and run it. And we get that P1 is this memory address and S is this memory address. They're the same. So what's going on is that string tokenization, this function, is not somehow like allocating space for all new strings on a heap and then giving us a pointer to those. What it's actually doing is it's actually inserting null terminators into this string, into S. And if we actually look at S after we do the string tokenization function, like after we do a run of it, we're going to find that there's actually a bunch of null terminators stuck in there. And all the pointers we're getting back, those pointers are just pointers to portions of the string, like this portion, then that portion, then that portion, then that portion. So let's actually do a printf of all the characters of S after we've done a run of string tokenization, like after we've tokenized the whole string. Let's do a printf, and we're going to do a loop. So we'll say loop from 0 up until, let's say, how many characters we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So about 23 characters there, maybe more if we want to include the null terminator. And we'll say I++, and let's just do an experiment here. Let's just do a printf. So we're going to say here, if the character in the string at I is equal to the null terminator, we're going to print out the null terminator. We got to do that kind of manually. So we're going to say here //0/n. And we got to do that manually because we can't really printf the null terminator and actually have it show up as the null terminator. So we'll print out the null terminator if the null terminator is the character present there. Otherwise, we're going to print out the character. So otherwise, let's print out the actual character in the string. So we're going to say printf %c, and we'll say here s at I. And we'll print out the character in the string. And we'll print them out all in new lines so we can kind of see what's going on here. So we're basically going to look at s after we've done this tokenization process now. And we're going to go from the beginning of the string until the end of the string, printing out all the characters. And as we encounter null terminators, though, we're going to print those out specially. And we're going to print them out like this. And we're going to print out basically /0. And so let's see what we get now. We'll clear this here. We run this. And look at what we got here. We've got this null terminator, is null terminator, the null terminator, way null terminator, again, and then null terminator. And so what's going on here is that when we call strtok, what it's doing is it's giving us a pointer to the next portion of the string as it goes. But what it's doing is it's setting the delimiter to be a null terminator to actually terminate that portion of the string. So just be aware of that when you use this function, it's going to actually modify the original string, and it's going to, depending on your opinion, pollute it with these null terminators. Now, you might be okay with that. You might not. If you're not okay with that, what you might want to do is actually copy your original string into some other array where you are comfortable with that string being sort of polluted with these null terminators. So that's the string tokenization function in C. It's a fun one, and I hope you like this video. Check out portfoliocourses.com, where we'll help you build a portfolio that will impress employers, including courses to help you develop C programming projects.